I became very familiar around 1940s with the teachings of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, and later with what is called the Alice Bailey teachings, which were given by one of the Masters of Wisdom, Master Jalkul, and it's a big body of teaching, some 19 books, plus some more books written by herself, and these make the philosophical background from which I speak, the teachings about the ageless wisdom teachings, the connection of humanity with these laws and information, and also about the plan for the return of the Christ to the world. And what I'm doing is simply bringing these teachings up to date, showing how the forecast, the plan for the return of the Christ to the world is actually working out in our time. It was not known, the exact time was not known, but I was contacted by one of the masters in the very beginning, January 1959, and later by Maitreya himself, the master of all the masters, who holds the office of the world teacher and is the Christ because he embodies the Christ principle, the Christ consciousness, the energy of love on this planet. And he is looked up to by all the masters as their guide, their counselor, their superior, in that he embodies the Christ principle and is the most knowledgeable, the oldest, the most evolved of all the masters. The Lord Maitreya contacted me about 3 months after my master, and he told me very simply that he himself was coming into the world. He said, sooner than anyone thinks possible, it will be in about 20 years. This was 1959, it will be about 20 years, so that would be 1979, if it was 20, and in fact it was 18 years, 1977. And he said I would have a role to play in his coming if I accepted it. And he didn't say what the role was, he just said I would have a role to play. So I made an inner pledge to do whatever was necessary, and that's all he said. And then my master said, well, you've heard today something very important, to change your whole view of things. The time is coming when you will be expected to act upon this information and make known his coming. The master began to train me and prepare me for what I've been doing ever since, which is preparing the world, creating the climate of hope, of expectancy for the coming of the Christ, so that he can come into our lives without infringing our free will. And that's what I've been doing since 1974, trained by the master who has worked through me in a way that this master, who lives in the Himalayas, he is a disciple, as are all the masters, disciple of Maitreya, and the connection is so close that he can teach through me, he can heal through me, he can see the world through me. If he likes, he can, if I touch, he touches. If I see, he sees. This conversation we're having now, he hears every word. Everything I say, everything I do is known to him, seen by him. If you suddenly hear a master's voice speaking to you, and it occurs and he gives you a long message or something, you could doubt very much that it was a master. It could really be your own imagination and so on. But when this is something which has developed over years and years and years, getting deeper and deeper, a closer and closer contact, when everything you say can be checked up immediately by me, by the master, and he has given me hundreds of manifestations, proof of his reality. I know him, I know his name, I know his work in the hierarchy, and so on. I'm not allowed yet to give his name, but personally I know it, and I have no doubt about the reality of the Master. Krishnamurti was one of a group of 4 disciples, advanced disciples, who were being trained as possible candidates, if you like the term, possible people who could be the vehicle for Maitreya to use, just as he used the vehicle of Jesus in Palestine, the way the Buddha used the vehicle of the Prince Gautama, and the Prince Gautama eventually became the Buddha. It's called the Buddha, but he's not the Buddha. He's the vehicle for the Buddha, overshadowed by the Buddha. Likewise, Jesus was not the Christ, but at the baptism was overshadowed by the Christ, and from the baptism through the crucifixion, Maitreya, the Christ, worked through him. The same sort of thing was being arranged with those 4 disciples. Then 3 of them stepped aside, and there was one left, Krishnamurti. And he was, from the very early age, being overshadowed gradually, more and more, more and more, more and more, by Maitreya as a possible candidate to be the vehicle. And the leaders of the then leaders of the Theosophical Society, Annie Besant and Leadbitter, took him up, fostered him, looked after him, groomed him and presented him to the world as the spokesman, if you like, for the Christ, for the embodiment of the Christ Maitreya in the future. Between 1910, 1940 and 1945, humanity underwent tremendous change. From the point of view of the Masters, that's one war, and it's a war which has been going on the astral, emotional planes for thousands and thousands of years. It was a war between the forces of light, as we call them, the forces of spirituality, which are the Masters under the leadership of Maitreya, in relation to what we call the forces of evil. The Masters don't call them the forces of evil, they call them the Lords of Materiality. They are a body of men incredibly advanced in some ways, from a mental point of view, as advanced as the Masters, but they have no love in their nature. They are devoid of that spiritual dimension, and they seek to overcome. They have a role to play, and that is to upkeep the matter aspect of the planet. And if they did that alone, there would be no evil involved in their work. But they don't do that alone. Their energy, their plans flow over onto the evolutionary plan. They're on the involutionary path. They overflow onto the evolutionary path on which we are, and it's inimical to our spiritual progress. So we have to be protected by the Masters so that we are not over swamped by that evil. Now the war was a war which finished for the time being the action of the forces of evil on the planet. They have now to be what's called sealed off to their own domain. And their domain is simply the upholding of the matter aspect of the planet. And that is done by the Masters living outwardly, openly in the world. And so there is a plan which has been going on for over 500 years where the Masters would begin to return to the world. It was thought it would maybe be 1300 years still, but in fact humanity made such progress, and the discovery of the atomic bomb makes it imperative that the Masters come out now into the world to protect humanity before we might destroy ourselves by the use of the bomb. Maitreya announced in 1945 that he would come into the world and bring a large group of the masses slowly, one by one, into the everyday world. And that is what I am saying. That's what is beginning to happen. There are now 14 masters in the world, plus Maitreya. 5 came in 1975, one into New York, one into London, one into Geneva, one in Darjeeling, and one in Tokyo. Later on, one came into Moscow. Well, he had been there, but he became more open, and one into Rome. The one in Rome is the well-known master whom we call the Master Jesus, who was Jesus of Nazareth in Palestine. He still uses the name Jesus, and he's one of the closest associates of Maitreya. Most Christians believe that the Antichrist is a man who will come out before the Christ returns, and even could, if we are not very awake and aware, could even be mistaken for the Christ. It's something entirely different. It is not a man, it's an energy. What we call the Antichrist is a negative energy, destructive energy, sent into the world by the Lord of the world himself to break down the old civilization, the old order, the old dispensation, and prepare it for the coming of the Christ. It is in Revelations of St. John, if you know it. The Antichrist broke down the Roman dispensation through the Emperor Nero. You know, Rome was obliterated, and that was necessary to prepare the way for Christendom. Once again, the Antichrist force was released. It was released through three nations: Germany, Japan, and Italy. The Axis powers in the war, that is Hitler and the group around him in Nazi Germany, together with a group of militarists in Japan and a group around Mussolini in Italy, formed the Axis powers through whom the energy of the what we would call the Antichrist forces were released. The war between the Allies, behind whom stood the masters, and the Axis powers, was a war, as I've said, literally between the forces of light and the forces of evil or darkness or materiality. And it ended in the destruction of the Axis regimes and the saving of humanity. And so the coming out into the world of the masters becomes a necessity because of the discovery of the atomic bomb. Otherwise, it might have taken place, it would have taken place certainly, but it might have taken place, say, 1,200 years from now or 1,300 years from now. But so acute becomes the crisis in humanity because for the first time in history, we have the possibility to destroy all life, human and subhuman. The masses have come out now actually ahead of schedule or ahead of their own expectation to make sure that we don't do that. Since July 19th, 1977, he's been living as an ordinary member of the Asian community in London. They don't know him as Maitreya. He is known and unknown. In the broad sense, he is unknown, but among a limited number of people, he is known, those with whom he works. He lives in various temples, usually Hindu temples, but he goes to mosques, He goes to churches, he goes to synagogues. He is, you know, for all religion. He is not representing any one religion. And he is known among some of the people as, they say, you know, it is talked about. They say, who is this man? They know he is somebody extraordinary, very important and very highly evolved. But they're not sure. If in the Muslim community they say he is the Imam Mahdi, and somebody else will say, no, he can't be the Imam Mahdi, because the Imam Mahdi, it says in the Quran, can only come in Damascus and on Judgment Day. This is not Judgment Day, and this is not Damascus, so it can't be the Imam Mahdi. But he is the Imam Mahdi, the expected one. It's another name he could use. He doesn't like these names because they bring about confusion. Others, if they're Christian, would say he's the Christ. They say he's the Christ. No, the Christ can only come into Jerusalem at the end of the world. It's not the end of the world, and we're not in Jerusalem. This is London. Jerusalem actually means a place of peace, and he comes into a world at peace. That's the meaning of Jerusalem. And he doesn't come on a cloud down from the sky, but he came on clouds just like you or I go on clouds. Every time we go on an aeroplane, we come in the clouds and we travel in the clouds. It's in that way he came, by aeroplane from, he descended from his center in the Himalayas on the 8th of July, 1977, in a body which he created himself. He's not born in the ordinary way. It's a body created in a way which is unique in the whole history of the world, which allows him to live at our level and at the same time bring in his full consciousness as the Christ, to the love of God embodied in a man in its perfection. It's the most unique event that has ever taken place in the world, I would say, and he will live in that body on this planet looking as he does today for the next 2,500 years, more or less. And that body allows him to be like an ordinary man, at the same time to appear and to disappear. He doesn't need to sleep, he doesn't need to eat, he doesn't even have a bed, he doesn't lie down, he can sit down, but he doesn't ever go to sleep. He just works all 24 hours, every second of it. His consciousness embraces the world. If people read Share International magazine, of which I'm the editor, we have hundreds of letters sent in all the time of experiences of people who have contact with Maitreya, or sometimes the Master Jesus, or another master, but very often Maitreya himself, in some extraordinary situation. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's profound, sometimes it lifts them up. They're so depressed, they're at the point of suicide or despair or whatever, and he lifts them up just by being there, just by seeing them, by smiling at them, or giving them some kind of experience. If you don't want to believe it, there's nothing I could say that would prove it, that's for sure. I have been doing this work for 28, I think it is, 27, 28 years, and if people are so cynical or so skeptical that there's nothing you could say. You could bring the Christ in and say, here he is. You say, well, that's not the Christ. It's certainly not the Christ I'm expecting, or something. There would be something wrong with the proof. To prepare his own way, he has flooded the world with miracles. Over the last 10, 12, 15 years, the world has been flooded with miracles for all the different religions. If among Christians, there are the appearances of the Madonna, the mother of Jesus, at Medjugorje in Yugoslavia, in places all over the world, figures of the Madonna which weep tears or blood, and it's analysed, and it's human blood, but has no droplets. It doesn't you know, it just goes on dripping. It doesn't harden. And in the Hindu community, there were 4 days when the gods, during the puja, the gods made of wood, bronze, silver, steel, stone, metals and stones and copper and all kinds, lapped up the milk which was offered in cups and spoons and little dishes of wood. As soon as they were offered to the gods for 4 days, that milk disappeared. Of course, nobody can explain it, but that milk, of course, was not drunk by the gods made of copper and teak and wood and bronze and all the rest of it. The milk was made to disappear by Maitreya and a group of masters who specialize in that particular kind of miracle. And so on. Every religion. There's a young girl in Lebanon who weeps every day, weeps crystals, razor-sharp crystals. If you touch it, you would cut your hand. And she weeps them out of her eyes every day without, you know, a great handful of crystals. Religious people, they say, well, if the Christ is coming back, I need a sign, I need a sign. And Maitreya once said through me, he gave 140 communications through me, and in one of them, number 10, I think it is, he said, those who search for signs will find them, but my method of manifestation is more simple. He doesn't need the signs, you might not need the signs, I don't need the signs, but they're there for anyone who needs them. And all, in my experience, all the religious groups need a sign. And they say, well, if you're right, the Christ comes, show me the signs. And they are everywhere. There are crosses of light which appear in hundreds, thousands of windows all over the world. In, you name a country, there is some manifestation like that. The cross circles, the circles of light on buildings, have been coming, to my knowledge, for about 2.5 years. They started, I first heard about them in America, then Canada, and then they moved across the United States and Europe, and now they're, you know, in Australia, New Zealand, you name it, wherever. And these are made by what I call the Space Brothers, that is those who use the UFOs, coming from the planets for various work which they do in our atmosphere, cleansing our atmosphere, mopping up so far as they can within the law our nuclear energy which we release into the atmosphere through our nuclear power stations and nuclear experimentation all the time. It's deadly. It's one of the greatest causes of ill health, causes the greatest number of deaths in the world, and they, although we don't know it, they have methods by which they have an implosion and they can neutralize this energy to an extent, not totally, because they're not allowed to totally, it would be an infringement of our free will, but so far as our free will allows, they go as far as that. Crop circles are everywhere. They could be in water on the side of mountains. They're not. They're only on crops because crops are cyclical. You know, you have a crop, a corn or so on, and it gets mature, and then they harvest it and so on. So you don't see the crop circle anymore. But it comes back again next year. Crop circles are not to do with Maitreya, but it is to do with the Space Brothers, yeah. But why are most of the crop circles in the south of England? Because Maitreya is here. That's the reason. You see, the hierarchies of each planet are in communication. We are not, but the masters are. And it's a solar system. Each planet works in relation to every other planet, and they affect each other. that hand is not an ordinary imprint. He didn't put his hand on the mirror. That hand is thought onto the mirror. It is a thought form imprinted on the mirror. As you can see, it's a total three-dimensional hand, like a photograph. It's not, if you put your hand on a mirror, it's just where you touch it, it will make a, on the dust of the mirror, it will make a few little marks. But there, it's a total three-dimensional, just like a very accurate photograph of a hand. And this is not the best version of it, but this is thought by Maitreya onto the it's a gift to the world before we actually see him in the world. It's the nearest he can come to everybody, and the way he can help everybody if they invoke his help. On the 11th, I think it is, 11th of June, 1988, in Nairobi, a most extraordinary event. There's a woman in Nairobi called Mary Akatsa, who is a fundamentalist Christian. She doesn't believe in Maitreya at all. She believes in the Christ. She's a very devout Christian. She is so fundamentalist, I don't know what her denomination is, but it would be very, very, very fundamentalist. She's not at all interested in anything I've said of this story. She doesn't believe Maitreya or the Masters or the plan or anything like that. She just believes in the Christ. She believes the Christ will return. And one day, she holds a meeting, or maybe twice a week, but at least once a week, but I think it's twice a week. She held this meeting just outside the town, and she has 6,000 followers. And we have photographs taken there by members of the group who showing them 6,000 people. And she said, God has spoken to me, and we're going to be visited by a great being, somebody very, very important. And suddenly, just beside her, stood this figure of Maitreya, dressed in a long white robe with a white headdress with a blue band round the headdress. And he spoke to the crowds, and they all said, ah. They thought he was the Christ. They immediately saw him as the Christ or Jesus, because they're Christians, so they would think Christ Jesus. So, Jesus, Christo, help me, save me. They were all there for healing. She's an extraordinary healer because Maitreya gives healing through that woman, Mary Akatsa. There's a man called Job Mutungi, who was the editor of the Kenya Times at the time, the Swahili editor of the Kenya Times, and he wrote it up in the Kenya Times. Did the Christ come to Nairobi this day? We got in touch with him, and he came over here and interviewed me for the story and so on, and he described it. He said it was quite extraordinary. He said the Saturday before, the week before, he was in the town, centre of the town, and he saw a star going round and round, it wasn't an aeroplane, it was a star, and it was silently going round and round the town. He said it reminded me of the Star of Bethlehem, that the wise men followed into the town, but he didn't know anything about it. He just saw it. He said, oh my, this must be a portent. This must mean something very big is going to happen. But he didn't know what, and nothing happened except that, which was big enough. The week later, Mary Akatsa said, a great being is coming, and just suddenly, miraculously, out of nowhere, came Maitreya. He spoke to the crowd in perfect, unaccented Swahili for maybe 15, 20 minutes, something like that. And he told Mary Akatsa at one point to put her hand in his pocket. And she said in the pocket were 4 crosses made of gold, big crosses like that. And she pulled one out, and we have a photograph of her holding the cross up like that. Big cross, about 14, 15 inches high, like that, made of gold. And then he healed about 40 or 50 people standing in the area where he was. Then he said, now I have to go, but I will be back with, they said, a bucket full of blessings. But my master said he didn't say a bucket, but they translated it as bucket. He said a vessel. I will be back with a vessel full of blessings. And he said, I have to go. And somebody there, one of the group there, said, well, I have a car. Can I take you to the station? So he got in the car, but he only went about 100 yards. And they said, I have to get out here. So he got out of the car and walked away. And he took a few steps and just disappeared, literally disappeared again. That was all over the world. CNN, BBC, Japanese television. It just covered the world for 2 days. But, you know, it wasn't football, it was the Christ, it wasn't too important, and so it just disappeared. It just became nothing. He is not a religious teacher. And if people think they're going to see the religious teacher is bringing a new religion or going to make Christianity more, bigger or something, they're wrong. He comes for every single human being, whether they're religious or non-religious, whatever the religion is, whatever their philosophy, wherever they are, he comes really to teach them, teach us who we are, where we come from, what is the purpose of life. We don't know any of these things. What happens when we die? What are the laws governing our life? We don't know these things. But the Ageless Wisdom teaching teaches these. And he comes to reenact what he began through Jesus 2,000 years ago and to complete it in this time. Then his work vis-a-vis humanity will be finished at the end of this coming age, which will be about 2,500 years. Humanity needs a big, dramatic happening to see reality, to understand what it's been doing, because they've been living in a fog, thinking that you could go on in this deeply divided and separative and unjust way forever. It's not going to happen like that. No way could you go on. Perhaps 2 or 3, 4, 5 more years, with the have-nots clamoring at the gates of the haves, you know, to get into the citadel. That's what the thousands of people from all over the world are clamoring to get into the developed world. They want food for their family, they want work. They can't find it at home. So they clamber anyway, legally or illegally. And there will come a time, because now they see it all. They see it on the internet, they see it on film, they see everything, they see it on television, they know what's going on. There's no way we can hide, keep ourselves to ourselves and hide the facts of our over-resplendent life. They can't do it. And these people with nothing, who have nothing to eat, nothing to give their families, they're not going to put up forever with that. So this is the time decision. We have to decide to share or we die. It's as simple as that. Not because Maitreya is going to make us die, but because the law of cause and effect will make it so. If we share, we will have peace. And it's the only way to share, because if you don't share, there will never be justice in the world. And if there's no justice, there will never be peace in the world. And if there's no peace in the world, there'll be no world, because now we can destroy all things on earth. We are waiting, and he has been waiting for a European and American stock exchange crash. And as soon as that would come, he would come forward. But he said, nothing less than that will bring humanity face to face with reality. We're living in a kind of fantasy world where we think we can go on in the way with which we're going when 1/3 of the world, the developed world, usurps and wastes 3/4 of the world's food and 83% of all other resources. So that is leading straight to a collapse of the world. He said the tensions inherent in that discrepancy in living between the developed and the developing world have within them the seeds of a third world war. He said that would be nuclear and would destroy all life in the world, human and subhuman alike. So he has decided that he will not wait to for the stock market crash any longer, because it's taking, always it falls. There have been crashes, little crashes, maybe losing quite a big percentage of the whole, but it always, when it reaches bottom, people come in and start buying at the bottom because it's cheap, you see. So they're called dredgers. They dredge the waters of the stock market at its lowest point, you see. They get all these bargains, and that brings the price up again. And then, of course, it's up for a little while, then it crashes again, and then they come in again. And this happens over and over and over and over again. And so he's had to wait and wait and wait. It's not enough that the Pacific or the South American crashes have occurred. It needs the European and above all the United States to bring humanity to its senses, so to see that it cannot go on in this way, because this is leading to destruction. And it's a result of what Maitreya calls commercialization. He says the engines of war have been switched off, but the energy which drove the planes into the sky or tanks onto the battlefield doesn't just disappear. When you switch off the war, that energy is looking for a new home, you know. It has to go somewhere. It's floating about, and it says it's going round and round the world, and it's now settled in what he's found a new womb, he said. He calls it commercialization. Market forces. Commercialization is the result of market forces economy, which has now taken over the economy of the whole world. Any government of any nation who blindly follows market forces is leading its nation to destruction. He says they are the forces of evil. Why? Because they have inbuilt inequality in them. They are based on the myth that if the nations trade together, allowing market forces to dictate the result, as if it were detached and not involved, you get justice. You get justice and a correct management of economy. He said it's a myth. It takes no account of the different levels of the nations. United States is trading with, say, Zaire or Uganda or India. Now, you cannot compare this. The wealth of the United States or of the European or the Japanese economies with the economies of, say, the sub-Saharan Africa and so on. Terrorism is the result of a sense of grievance. That sense of grievance is a sense of injustice in the world. It's the injustice caused by globalization, by the commercialization of all aspects of life that is driving more and more people to terror. Without the poverty, the humiliation, the frustration in the world between the despairing Arab nations, for example, and America, there wouldn't be terrorism, they wouldn't enter into terrorism. You can never get rid of terrorists. They're in every country of the world. You could attack every country. Where do you stop? But if you could attack every country, they might try to do it. It would be stupid to try, but they might try to do it. They would still never get rid of terrorists. If terrorists is built on injustice, if you have injustice, you'll have terrorism. It's inevitable. If America really wants to get rid of terrorism, what it has to do is to learn to share the resources of the world. America has about 4 to 5% of the world's population only, but it consumes 25% of the resources of the world. It creates huge amounts, about a quarter of the pollution of the world, and yet it won't sign the Kyoto Protocol to stop the emissions of gases into the world. They say it's not in our interest to do it. It's in everybody's interest to do it. You can't take yourself out of the world in that way. That is blind folly. He comes as a teacher to teach us how to live together in peace, and to develop ourselves in accordance to the potential, the spiritual potential which exists in every single person. That's what he's here for, to become like the masters, divine, perfected, evolved to a point where we don't need to incarnate on this planet anymore. That is what being a master is. A master has complete control on all planes and has nothing more to learn on this planet. And so his presence on the planet is his choice, simply that. He is not here because of karmic choice. It's simply his own choice of serving on this world. And not all the masters do. Some go on to other planets or even out of the solar system. Well, the first thing I understand he will do, he will take up an invitation he has had for a long time to appear on a major television network in the world. And that will allow him to speak to some millions in America. It will be followed by an appearance in Japan, which will let him speak to 120 million or whatever the population is. And then, of course, all the networks of the world will want to interview him. The other American networks, the BBC. The BBC could have done it for any time over the last, how many years is it, since 1977? They could have had him on television just by asking him. He actually went to the BBC in January, February, March of 1986. He had many contacts with a group of people at the top, at the directorship of the BBC. And they found it difficult in the beginning to see him in terms of their idea of the Christ. Naturally, because, you know, they're Christians and they're not esotericists and so on, they're journalists and so on. But eventually, by dint of the experiences which he gave them, I mean, they're extraordinary. I can't say what some of them were, but they were quite extraordinary. Would leave you and me and everybody that this happened to with no doubt at all that that man was who he says he is. They agreed to make a press conference, for the BBC to organise a press conference at which he would appear, bringing together the media of the whole world. And that was in March 1986. Then they reneged on it. They said they would do it and they didn't do it. And they put it off April, May, June, July. By September, Maitreya became totally convinced that they weren't going to do it. They changed their mind. They went to the Queen, and they told the Queen what they were going to do. And I'm talking about the Director General. He told the Queen what he was going to do. He didn't ask permission. He just thought he should tell her as head of church and state. And of course, she did the obvious thing. She got in touch with her spiritual advisors, the then Archbishop of Canterbury and the bishops, and they came down on the whole thing like a ton of bricks, as we say. And through the governors of the BBC, they forced him to resign, and he resigned in September 1986. So Maitreya then began on a slow process of coming forward himself. It would have been over long, long ago if the BBC had actually gone through with what they promised to do. But they didn't, and so he's been forced to do it the hard way, the slow way, which doesn't infringe our free will, but takes longer to do. Meantime, people are dying and so on. On the day of declaration, to get back to that, he will, I don't know how long it will take, maybe 30 minutes, 35 minutes, something, 40 minutes, something like that. He will not speak, not say a word, but his thoughts, his ideas will be heard inwardly, telepathically, by everybody in the world, everybody above the age of 14. So if you're 14, you're Slovenian, you'll hear him in Slovenian. If you're Russian, you'll hear him in Russian. Americans in American. English in English, French in French, Dutch in Dutch, and so on. He will come into telepathic rapport with every adult in the world, and each of us will hear him inwardly, telepathically, in our own language. So you will hear him as if he's speaking directly to you, which in a sense he is. He thinks what he's wanting to say, and our brains will simply translate that into Slovenian, French, Dutch, German, Spanish, whatever. He will give a kind of account of the long history of humanity, show how old we are, from what a height, a spiritual height, we have descended into this materiality of today, endangering the very future of the species, and at the same time showing the future, what it can be like if we just accept that we're brothers and sisters of one humanity. We can create a civilization based on that, which will take us, as he puts it, to the very stars. And the masters will give to humanity their insight, their wisdom, their age-old wisdom and experience and knowledge, and stimulate and galvanize humanity into creating the most brilliant civilization. While this is going on, his energy, which we call the Christ principle, the energy of love, will flow out in tremendous potency throughout the world. He has said it will be as if I embrace the world. People will feel it even physically. And at the same time, and this will create an inner certainty that this is the Christ, an intuitive understanding of the message, a heartfelt response to the message. And on the physical plane, there will be hundreds of thousands of spontaneous miracle cures, healings all over the planet. And in these three ways, you will know that that one is the Christ, the world teacher, the Imam Mahdi, the Messiah, Maitreya Buddha, Krishna, by whatever name you await him. you will know that that one has come and beginning his outer mission in the world. Oh, it would go on. It wouldn't stop the plan. You say I'm important, but I'm not that important. The plan goes on. My trail will appear. It would just be as if I were around. I mean, I have done a work so far as I can, which will be carried on by those who stay. I have contact with thousands of disciples all over the world. They will carry on with the work. They won't be so happy as they were when I was around, because I make jokes, and keep them happy. But they will do the work. I'm not worried about that. I would say to people who have heard this story, if they can believe it, at any level, if they're convinced, of course, they will want to do something. They will want to make it known. They shouldn't stop. They shouldn't think, oh, might be true, might not be true. If they're convinced at this moment that they're listening to it, that it's true, they should make it known at that level. And that will drive them to a rhythm of work and effort that they've never known before. But they will be doing something that it's something so important for the world that it's a joy for them to do it, and an opportunity that only comes how many times? Once in 98,000 years or something like that. This is an opportunity such has never happened in the world. People have no idea. Even I who know it, I know it theoretically, I find it hard to take in. This is an event without precedence in the whole of human history. There has never been an event that we have, for the first time in history, the Christ actually physically walking the world, not using a disciple, as with Jesus, or the Buddha through the Prince Gautama, and so on. Back through history, it always was like that. But we have the hierarchy, not just one man, but dozens, 40 masters eventually, out in the world, men with unbelievable wisdom and knowledge and experience and love, manifested love. It will awaken the world to a new consciousness, and in that new consciousness, humanity will find itself and will create the most wonderful civilization that this world has ever seen. If you want to be part of that, make it known. Make this information known. Tell everybody who will listen. You don't have to be convinced as I am convinced. You don't need to have had my experiences, which give me my conviction. But if you can even tiny percentage know that it is, feel that it is true, feel that it is worth telling about, do that and you will never, ever regret it. Wait only a little time now, and you will see me, your elder brother, who loves each and every one of you. it.